And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
I really like the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy. I especially enjoy the movies. And I've always said I really liked War of the Ring because War of the Ring covered, the board game covered the entire, to me, the book or the movies. It really felt like it was this whole sweeping thing. Kind of a long game, but one I enjoyed. I got here MiddleEarth Quest, and this is a game that supposedly, I shouldn't say supposedly, but it takes place before Lord of the Rings. It's between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And in fact, the characters that you're using in this game, I've never even heard of them, although many of the people that you run across, like Gandalf and Saruman and, you know, the bad guys, you know who most of those are, but it doesn't matter. To me, this game really captures the flavor of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, maybe even more than War of the Ring does. I'm very impressed with this game. Now, I'm not going to be able to go over how this whole game works because it is a fairly long game, kind of complex. I mean, once you play, it's not that difficult, but basically, one player is playing the Shadow, and the other players are playing several good characters who are trying to stop the expanse of the Shadow. And, you know, it's a very, both sides have different things to do, but it's a very balanced game. In fact, I think the Shadow player really has to move to keep up with the good guys. But I can't show you everything about the game, but I can show you some of the aspects that I like. Let's look at them. Here's the board, and I can barely get the whole thing in the camera. It's a really giant board. It's a map of Middle-earth, and this is even before all the pieces. Once we start putting the pieces all over the board, there's a ton of cards and tokens that come with this game, and it really has an interesting feel as players are moving their characters around the board. Each of the good guys is going to pick a character that they're going to use. For example, here's two of the characters. We have Argalad and Thalen, and they come with a plastic miniature, really nice molds, these plastic miniatures. But I challenge you to play a game of this and not call this Legolas or Gimli. I mean, it's very difficult not to call these by the names of their more famous counterparts from the actual Lord of the Rings. But each character has different stats, and they have different quests that they're going to be going on. And then they have their own combat deck, basically. There's a combat deck that is for each of the characters. This combat deck is a very useful thing. See, basically it starts here, next to the character, and it is basically their life pool. Characters have a certain amount of life, and they'll be drawing these cards into their hand. When characters want to move on the board, they will be using these symbols down here in the corner. You can see the sun, and they'll be using these symbols to move. So you can move as much as you want in your turn as long as you have the cards for it, and then those cards are placed above the character in this rest pool. If you want to, at certain points in the game, you can rest, which will bring all the cards in your rest pool back into your life pool. And I think that's a neat mechanic, because the more cards you use, the lower your health point comes gone. See, if all the cards in your life pool are gone, and all the cards in your hand are gone, then your character is going to die, something you don't want. If you are fighting in a battle, and you lose hit points, cards are then placed in a damage pool, rather than in the rest pool. You could have cards in both, actually. And these cards in the damage pool, well, those are harder to get back. Those you actually have to go to a city to be healed from. You can't just rest and get those back. And I thought this was a pretty neat mechanic in showing how all this works together, both rest and hit points and life points, while using these cards for both movement and combat. Players have this deck of cards, which I just showed you, which is their combat movement deck, and many times during the game they can get training, and they can go through another special deck of cards and get a couple cards, and they may add one or two of these cards to their deck, which increases your life points and gives you more options when it comes to combat. Characters are either ranged or melee in the combat, but these cards can add and allow you to do more things in combat, so there's a way to actually customize your deck.